This isn't the longest story I have, but it's been on my mind a lot lately, probably because of how real it felt. How close it came to crossing a line. It all happened just a few days ago. My friend, we'll call him Jay, had invited me to meet him for lunch at our favorite buffet. A small place tucked into a strip plaza, not far from his apartment. We hadn't seen each other in a bit, so I agreed, got dressed, and ordered an Uber. It was a bright afternoon, not too hot, and I stepped outside to wait, lighting a cigarette to kill the time. The Uber pulled up just a few minutes later, a clean gray sedan, music thumping faintly from the inside. I got in, buckled up, and gave a polite hello. He greeted me warmly and pulled off. The drive started off like most others. The driver, early 30s, short beard, thick accent I couldn't quite place, asked me the usual questions. Where are you headed? How's your day going? Then he asked something else. You single? I gave a tight smile and said I was on my way to meet a friend for lunch. I hoped that would steer the conversation away, but he perked up at the word friend. A boyfriend? He asked. No, just a friend, I said. He grinned. Maybe I come in with you. Try this buffet. You say it's good, yes. My stomach tensed. It was subtle, but something in the way he said it, so casual, like we already knew each other, made my skin crawl. I laughed nervously and didn't answer. I've always had good instincts, and I keep my guard up, especially as a visually impaired woman. I use a screen reader to check messages and keep my phone close. So while I sat there, trying to keep calm, I held my phone to my ear, pretending to be listening to messages from Jay and another friend of ours, P. I turned the volume down low so only I could hear it, but the driver kept interrupting. Every time I brought the phone to my ear, he'd start talking again, louder this time, like he didn't want me to tune him out. It was getting harder to focus on the messages. The brightness in the car made it nearly impossible to read the screen, and with no earbuds, I left them at Jay's the last time I visited. I couldn't just tune him out. The conversation turned weirder. He asked what I did for work. I told him honestly that I wasn't working at the moment. He nodded and said, "That's okay. I know a program. You join. They pay you $2,000 a week." I raised an eyebrow. Doing what? He leaned in a little. Just sign up. It's private. I send you the link. Give me your number. I send it. I mumbled something non-committal. Sure, maybe when we get there. He seemed satisfied with that answer. The tone shifted again. We were getting closer to the plaza, and I'd been keeping an eye on the map. But instead of pulling in right away, he drove past the entrance. Then he circled the block. Once. Twice. Then again. We just passed it, I said. I know, he replied calmly. Hard to see the sign. The buffet had a big red sign. You couldn't miss it. He had passed it 3 times. I wasn't scared yet, but my nerves were shot. I kept smiling, pretending everything was fine. I even looked down at my phone and texted Jay, "Come outside the second I get there." Something's off. Jay didn't respond right away. I tried not to panic. Finally, the driver pulled into the plaza and found the right spot. He slowed, then stopped the car in front of the buffet. I unbuckled. "Thanks," I said quickly. As I opened the door to step out, he smiled again. "I'll come in soon. Maybe we eat together, yeah?" I hesitated only for a second, gave a fake smile, and nodded. "Sure." Then I shut the door and bolted. Jay had just stepped outside, talking to our friend A on the phone. He saw me speed walking toward him, my face pale and tense. He immediately hung up and asked what was wrong. I didn't get to say a word before he turned and noticed the Uber driver, still sitting there, engine running, staring directly at me. Jay's face twisted into something between concern and fury. He squared his shoulders and yelled, "Hey, man, what are you looking at?" The driver flinched like a kid caught misbehaving. Then, without a word, he sped off, turning out of the lot and vanishing down the road. I stood there, heart pounding, grateful to have someone else with me. Someone who had seen him. I told Jay everything as we walked into the buffet. Every strange question, every delayed turn, every attempt to keep me from listening to my messages. Jay shook his head. That guy wasn't just weird. He was trying something. We stayed alert throughout the meal. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see that same gray sedan cruise by slowly, its driver scanning the sidewalk. But he didn't come back. At least, not that day. We made it home safely, but I didn't relax. I reported him to Uber immediately, flagged the ride, and rated it the lowest I could. Uber's reply? A basic, "We're sorry to hear about your experience. We'll look into it." That's it. No update. No follow-up. It wasn't until later that I realized how close it had come to becoming something worse. I had told him I was visually impaired. I had told him I didn't have a job. I had told him I didn't have earbuds and couldn't read my phone. He knew I was vulnerable. And I think he liked that. I don't know what would have happened if Jay hadn't been outside when I arrived. Or if I'd taken longer to get out of the car. Maybe nothing. But maybe something else. Something darker. So I share this now not because it was the most dramatic or violent thing to ever happen to me, but because it could have been. And because someone else might not be as lucky. Always trust your instincts. Always have someone waiting for you when you can. And never, ever let politeness silence your fear. When I was around 15 or 16, my idea of danger was shaped by movies and late-night shows. Villains wore ski masks and strangers lurked in shadows. But nothing could have prepared me for what danger really looked like. It looked like a man behind the wheel of a red car. It started on a humid afternoon. My mom, my younger brother, 7, my little sister, 8, and I were heading out somewhere. I honestly can't remember where. All I remember is that we needed a ride, and our family SUV wasn't at the house. Dad wasn't home, so we called an Uber. We waited outside, standing at the edge of our driveway, shaded by the large maple tree that had watched over our house since before I was born. We waited for what felt like forever, constantly checking the app, watching the little car icon shuffle around on the screen. Then, out of nowhere, a red car came swerving down the road. It tore past our house at full speed, barely keeping to its lane, before whipping around at the end of the street and speeding back toward us. The tires screeched slightly as it slowed near our driveway. He nearly hit us. The driver rolled down his window. He was an older black man, maybe late 50s or early 60s, with patchy gray facial hair and a faded baseball cap pulled low over his brow. There was something strange about the way he spoke. It wasn't slurred, exactly, but disjointed, like his thoughts weren't syncing properly with his words. "You live here?" he barked, loudly, pointing at our house. We were startled. "Yes," we all said, confused. Then he started yelling. Where's the damn number?" We tried to tell him. My mom pointed to the big metal house numbers nailed right next to the front door. But he didn't seem to care. He kept yelling, waving his arms, as if we were purposely hiding our address from him. Mom was doing her best to stay calm, but I could see the tension building in her shoulders. She turned to my siblings and said, "Go inside." Her voice had that sharpness to it, low, tight, controlled. I stayed. I was the oldest. I didn't want to leave her alone with this man. "Forget it," my mom told him firmly. "You can go. We don't need the ride anymore." But that only made him angrier. He threw the door open and stepped out of the car. The distance between us evaporated in seconds as he stormed up our driveway, getting in my mom's face. I was pissed. My heart was pounding and my fists were clenched at my sides. But I was still a kid, barely taller than my mom, and this was a grown man twice my age and size. Mom stood her ground. "Get off my property," she snapped. I stepped beside her. "Yeah, get out of her face." He didn't flinch. "No," he growled. For 5 full minutes, they went back and forth. Mom trying to de-escalate, to reason, but her voice kept rising. His yelling grew more aggressive, louder, jumbled with profanity. Finally, she grabbed my arm, and we both turned, storming back into the house. She picked up the phone and called the police. We gave them his license plate number and a detailed description of the man and the car. She also reported him through the Uber app. The response came surprisingly fast. Within an hour, she got a message confirming that he had been flagged and removed from the platform. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. That same night, hours later, something happened that chilled me more than his shouting ever could. We were all in the living room, me, Mom, and Dad. The kids were upstairs. The big front window looked out toward the street, and the blinds were wide open because it was a nice night, and we were trying to catch the breeze. We were mid-conversation when my dad suddenly leaned forward, squinting at the street. "Hey, isn't that the guy?" he asked. Mom went pale. Outside, a red car was idling across the street. It was him. The driver was just sitting there, staring. I don't think he realized Dad was home now. Without a word, my father jumped up and stormed out the front door. As soon as he hit the steps, the car peeled out, screeching as it disappeared down the street. As it sped off, the driver rolled down his window, leaned out, and screamed. "You people got me fired." Then he flipped us off as he vanished into the night. Mom stood frozen, her hand over her mouth. I felt like my stomach had dropped through the floor. But that wasn't the last time we saw him. The next day, my dad was up early, standing at the kitchen window with his cup of coffee, as he always did. He froze mid-sip. Then he called out, "He's back." I ran to the window, and sure enough, there he was again, parked across the street. Same car, same hat, just sitting there, watching. This time, Dad didn't even speak. He opened the front door and walked straight out onto the lawn. As he stepped forward, the car suddenly reversed, wheels squealing, and sped away once more. That was the last we saw of him. At least, we think it was. Because about a week later, we saw another red car, same make, same model, creeping past our house in the middle of the day. It drove slowly, almost unnaturally so, like the driver was searching for something. We never saw the face inside. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was him. But none of us left the blinds open after that. It's been years since that happened. I'm in my 20s now, but I still remember that man's face. That unhinged glare. The way he stood toe-to-toe with my mom like she was a threat to him. It's terrifying to realize how easily someone like that can enter your life, how fragile the line is between a routine ride and a nightmare. All because we needed a lift. My biggest takeaway? Be cautious. Be so cautious. These apps are convenient, but they don't screen for intent. They can't protect you from the wrong person behind the wheel. And if someone's willing to risk their job to harass a mother and her kids, there's no telling what else they're capable of. A few years ago, when I was 21, I had to catch a flight out of the Tri-State Airport in Huntington, West Virginia. I didn't have a ride that day, my roommate was out of town, my friends were all working, and I didn't want to risk parking my car at the airport long term. It wasn't a huge airport, but still, money was tight. So I did what most people do. I ordered an Uber. That was the first mistake. It was around 10 a.m. when the car arrived. A red Toyota Corolla, nothing fancy, nothing alarming. I had been tracking its approach on the app, so I already knew it was my driver. But the moment I stepped inside, I should have trusted my instincts. The smell hit me first. It was overwhelming, a nauseating mix of stale marijuana, body odor, and something else, something sour and sickly, almost like something dead had been in the car recently. I hesitated with my hand on the door, instinct screaming at me to back out. But the driver, a pale, lanky man with greasy hair and thin lips, turned and smiled. His teeth were yellowed, one of them chipped. "You ready?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded, told myself it was fine. Just nerves. I needed to get to the airport. It was a short ride. I could handle it. I got in. The first 10 minutes were uneventful. He made small talk that felt more like an interrogation. Where was I headed? What was the purpose of my trip? Was I meeting someone there? Then came the first red flag. He asked, "Mind if I take the interstate?" I shook my head. Actually, could we take the back roads? I'm not really comfortable with the highway. I don't know why I asked that. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe intuition, maybe just the fact that I didn't trust his driving based on how jittery he seemed. He adjusted his sunglasses, odd, considering it wasn't even sunny out, and looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Sure," he muttered. He said sure. But 15 minutes later, I noticed something was wrong. We were approaching an on-ramp to the interstate. I leaned forward. "Hey," I said. I didn't want to take the interstate. He didn't respond. He laughed. Not a light laugh. A sharp, sudden, almost manic burst that echoed in the small cabin of the car. Before I could react, he swerved onto the on-ramp, gunning the engine like he was in a race. The force pushed me back into the seat, and my heart dropped. "Don't worry," he said, still chuckling. "We'll get there faster this way." The way he said it didn't feel like a reassurance. It felt like a threat. I sat back, every muscle in my body tensing. My fingers gripped my phone like a lifeline. The exits whizzed by, one after another, and I realized I was trapped in a speeding car on a deserted stretch of highway with a man who had just made it clear he wasn't going to listen to me. He kept swerving in and out of lanes, cutting people off, laughing again and again at his own jokes, none of which I understood. At one point, he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You know, you shouldn't get into cars with strangers. Could be anyone behind the wheel. Could be dangerous." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, and I was trying to stay calm, trying not to let him know how scared I was. I spotted a rest stop sign up ahead. It was my chance. "Hey," I said quickly. "Can you pull over there? I forgot something. I need to make a call before I get on the plane. Please." He glanced at the sign, then at me. His smile returned, wider than before. Nope. He blew past the exit like it didn't exist. That's when panic set in. I felt like I was being kidnapped, trapped. I didn't even know where we were anymore. The world outside was a blur of green trees and empty lanes. No towns, no buildings, no witnesses. I tried to open the door, just to check, to feel like I still had some control. It was locked. Child safety locks. I was locked in. The next 10 minutes felt like a fever dream. He started talking to himself more than me, muttering under his breath, saying things I couldn't make out. Then suddenly he turned around and looked at me while still driving. You know, Uber's not even my main job, he said. I don't do this for the money. I just like meeting people. Some people are worth the detour. My vision blurred for a second, and I realized I was crying. Quietly, without even realizing it. That's when he pulled off the highway. But it wasn't at the airport exit. It was some random road, winding and surrounded by trees, a steep incline leading to what looked like an old service road or maintenance path. And then, he pulled into a ditch. The car dipped with a jolt, and we were suddenly surrounded by tall grass and thick brush on either side. I sat up, my voice shaking now. Where are we? What are you doing? He didn't answer. He just sat there, staring forward, breathing heavily. I stared out the window, heart thudding so hard it made my chest ache. I was convinced someone was going to come out of those trees. Someone waiting. I pictured a second man running out, pulling the door open, dragging me out while he watched. My hand shook. I opened my phone and hovered over the SOS emergency call option. My thumb was on it when he suddenly reversed. Slamming his foot on the pedal, he jerked the car out of the ditch, tires spitting gravel as we bounced back onto the road. Then he sped up. He tore down the road like he was possessed, going 80, then 90 miles an hour, cutting across traffic, ignoring stop signs, red lights, everything. I couldn't even be relieved. I was just bracing myself for the crash that felt inevitable. When we finally reached the airport, I shouted, "This is it. Right here. Let me out." He hit the brakes and coasted to a stop at the departure's entrance. I reached for the door, still locked. He got out first, walked around, and opened my door. But instead of stepping back, he stood there, blocking the exit, towering over me. "You know," he said, tilting his head, "maybe next time, don't get in cars with strangers. Might not end so well." I shoved past him and ran. I didn't look back until I was inside the terminal. He was still standing there, just watching. I reported him the second I had Wi-Fi. Uber gave me a generic response. "We'll investigate. Thank you for your report." That was it. I never saw him again. Never got paired with him again. But I still think about that ride. About that ditch. About what might have happened if I hadn't cried. If I hadn't spoken. If I hadn't stared him down and demanded to get out. The truth is, I don't know what he had planned. But I don't think it was just a detour. And I'll never forget the smell of that car. Like death. Like he was just waiting for the right passenger. The right victim. It was a typical Wednesday night. Nothing out of the ordinary. I had just spent the day with my boyfriend, who lives a town over from me. We'd been dating for a while, about 7 months, and everything between us had been easy, natural, sweet, even. He often ordered me lifts to and from his place since I didn't drive at the time, and it had always been safe, convenient, until this night. The lift he ordered for me pulled up right on time. It was an older gray car, the kind you'd expect, no red flags on the surface. My boyfriend walked me out, helped me with my overnight bag, and gave me a long, warm kiss goodbye before opening the back door for me. It was such a normal goodbye. Comfortable. Familiar. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment was the last time I felt safe that night. I got into the car and met the driver. He was a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, from Cuba. He barely spoke any English and used Google Translate for most of the ride to communicate. That wasn't unusual. I've had drivers from all over. It didn't bother me at first, but things started to feel off, quickly. The first thing he asked was whether I could sit in the front seat. "I don't like people sitting behind me," he said through his translation app. It made me pause. It wasn't a request. It was said in a way that felt more like a rule. Still, I didn't want to be rude, and I've had drivers ask that before, so I nodded and complied. But the moment I climbed over the console and into the passenger seat, I felt it, his eyes. Watching. Lingering far too long on how I moved. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Once I was seated and buckled in, He started playing music, adjusting the volume with what felt like exaggerated care. "Is this okay?" he asked. I nodded again, offering a polite smile. "It's fine." Then he said, "I hope I'm not being too forward, but you're very beautiful." I gave a tight smile. I get that kind of comment sometimes. Most women do. Still, my stomach sank a bit. I just said, "Thank you." He continued the ride like a normal driver for a while, but something was shifting in his tone. The questions started coming one after the other. "Am I taking you to your house?" "Yes," I replied, assuming he already had my destination from the app. "Do you live alone?" "No, with my boyfriend." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. He gestured toward my boyfriend as we drove off and asked, "Was that him? The guy who kissed you?" "Yes," I said. Then, more boldly, "Can I be your boyfriend, too?" I laughed awkwardly. "No, I'm in love with my boyfriend. I'm very loyal to him." His smile didn't fade. In fact, he seemed amused by my answer, as though it were cute, not a boundary, but a challenge. "In Cuba, it's normal to have many girlfriends," he said. "They don't all know about each other." "Well, that's not how it works for me," I said, this time more firmly. His tone turned mildly disappointed. "Your boyfriend made a mistake, sending you home alone. If it were me, I'd take you myself and make sure you were safe." I laughed again, trying to mask how uncomfortable I felt. It was that instinct many of us have: don't escalate. Don't be rude. Stay polite. Make it to the end of the ride. He went quiet for a few minutes, just long enough for me to relax a little. Then came the next wave. "Can I come home with you?" "No." "Please." "No." He paused. "You're just so beautiful. I really want to be your other boyfriend." At this point, I stopped responding. I just shook my head and focused on my phone, pretending to read messages, hoping he'd get the point. But he wasn't finished. "I have a lot of money," he said. "I'd take care of you. You wouldn't have to work again." I repeated that I wasn't interested. He didn't seem offended, just stubborn. Then he asked if he could give me his number. I told him no, trying to sound lighthearted, hoping that humor would deflect his persistence. It didn't. Eventually, we pulled up in front of my house. Relief washed over me as I reached for the door handle. But he got out of the car first. He rushed to the passenger side and opened the door for me, almost like a date. I quickly grabbed my bag, refusing his offer to carry it, and said, "Thanks for the ride." But he stopped me. "Wait," he said, fumbling for his phone. "Let me give you my number. Maybe I can come inside." My heart raced. "No, thank you. Have a good night," I said, already turning toward my house. He stepped closer. "Just for a minute." I didn't reply. I reached the door, got inside as fast as I could, and locked every single bolt behind me. I leaned against the door, hands trembling. Then I grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend. He was furious. I could hear it in his voice. He immediately reported the driver to Lyft, explaining everything that happened. But Lyft's response? A $5 credit. They didn't even ask what the driver had done. No warning. No concern. Just a digital pat on the back for inconvenience. That hit me like a second wave of violation. It told me how little these companies cared, how little they protected us, how easily predators like him could slip through their system. I don't know what he would have done if I'd said yes. If I had laughed too kindly. If I'd hesitated just a second longer outside my door. But I think about it more often than I'd like to admit. I think about how quickly a ride meant to take me home could have taken me somewhere else entirely. Final thoughts. For a long time, I wondered if I was overreacting. If maybe he was just awkward, too forward. But deep down, I knew better. Because when someone asks, twice, to come into your home, when someone tells you your boyfriend made a mistake by letting you travel alone, when someone keeps pushing even after you say no, that's not awkward. That's dangerous. It started with a missed bus. I live in a city that technically has a public transportation system, but functioning would be a generous word for it. Lately, they've been so short-staffed that buses barely showed up, even during rush hour. So when mine was late for the third time that week, I called the transit office, and they arranged a Lyft ride through a government contract to get me to work. Seemed convenient at the time. The driver showed up within 10 minutes. He was older, probably late 50s, with a clean-cut look and a soft, calming voice. His car was spotless, and he greeted me like a gentleman. The ride started with small talk, nothing too out of place. The weather, how the city was getting worse, how nice it was that the city offered free Lyft rides when the buses failed. Then the conversation shifted. He asked, "So, are you married?" I hesitated, but I've always been friendly, maybe too friendly. I told him I wasn't married, that I mostly kept to myself. I was just working, spending time with family. It wasn't a lie. I'm a bartender, and I was used to oversharing a little to keep people comfortable. It's second nature in my line of work. He laughed softly and said, "If I were a little younger, I'd marry you in a heartbeat." I chuckled politely, brushed it off. He dropped me off at a downtown grocery store so I could grab a few items before work. As I got out, he handed me a slip of paper. "My number," he said, "just in case you ever need another ride." I didn't think much of it. I mean, I had just gotten a ride through public transit. Maybe he thought it was practical. But the next morning, he texted me, "Need a ride to work today?" I was surprised, but again, I didn't feel threatened. It felt courteous, and I figured I'd avoid another missed bus situation. So I agreed. He said he'd pick me up at 3 p.m. Then, an hour later, he texted again. "Want to grab lunch before work?" That's when the unease began. I politely declined, saying I had things to take care of. He didn't argue, just said, "Okay, I'll see you at 3. At 3 p.m. sharp, he texted, "I'm outside." When I opened my front door, I saw him, not waiting in the car, but walking up my porch steps like a friend visiting for coffee. I stopped him mid-step. "I'm ready. We can head downtown," I said, trying to sound cheerful but firm. We got in the car, and the second we were on the road, he turned around to face me while driving and said, "I have a confession." His voice dropped low. "Serious. When you took off your mask yesterday, my heart danced like a butterfly." I froze. He continued, "You're so beautiful. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. I've never felt this way before." I forced a nervous laugh, not knowing what else to do. "You're sweet, but I'm just trying to get to work." "I'd love to spend more time with you," he said. "I'd even pay for your time, just to be with you. You're a Lebanese queen." That's when the discomfort turned to fear. I smiled politely and said nothing. I knew better than to escalate things. When you're a woman trapped in a moving vehicle with a man who's crossing every boundary, it's not always safe to tell him to shut up. The rest of the ride was unbearable. He kept glancing at me, making increasingly inappropriate comments, complimenting my eyes, my lips, my aura. When we finally arrived at my hotel job, I practically dove out of the car. But not before he said, "See you tomorrow." I didn't respond. That night at work, I checked my phone during a break. 7 missed texts. He'd sent a picture of the hotel I worked at. "I'll be waiting for you after your shift," he said. "I want to make sure you get home safe." I lied and texted back, "I already have a ride, but thanks." The next day, I was out running errands with my mom and sister when another text came in. "How early can I pick you up today? I can't stop thinking about you." I responded, trying to be polite but firm. "I'm with my family right now. I'll let you know if I need a ride." He didn't get the message. He texted me all day and all evening. "I miss you. My heart aches for you. You're meant to be mine." I showed my sister the messages. Her face went pale. Then came Friday morning. The tipping point. "I told my wife about you," he texted. "I want a divorce. I'm in love with you." I blinked at my phone, stunned. I hadn't replied in hours. He continued. "She knows. It's not your fault. We've been drifting anyway. I'm coming to get you for dinner at 5:30. I'm not taking no for an answer." That was it. The final line. Not a request. A statement. I didn't answer. At exactly 5:25 p.m., my video doorbell went off. There he was, standing on my porch, looking up at the camera, not knocking, just standing there. For 15 long minutes. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I was home, but I told him I wasn't. He texted again. "I'll come pick you up from your parents' place. Just tell me where." My hands were shaking as I dialed the non-emergency police line. They picked up, but by the time they were ready to dispatch someone, he had already left. I filed a general report. The officer said it technically wasn't a crime yet unless he was actively threatening me. There wasn't much they could do. I was told to document everything to report him to Lyft, which I did. Lyft's response? A generic message. "We're sorry to hear about your experience. We'll look into it." That was it. No confirmation of action. No reassurance of safety. Just silence. That man stood on my porch after I begged him to stop. He told his wife about me. He called me his Lebanese queen. Over and over again. He said he'd pay me just to be near me. And the system designed to protect riders, the one that had my home address, my work location, my ride history, didn't protect me. It still haunts me. How easily kindness is mistaken for consent. How quick they are to punish drivers for one-star ratings, yet ignore red flags like these. I still think about what would have happened if I'd opened the door. If I hadn't lied. If I'd stepped outside for just 1 second. Because the scariest part of this story? He still knows where I live.